There's a saying that goes, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. With that in mind, the journey of the school year starts with the first day. In this video, I will share with you 3 of the things I would highly recommend you do on the first day of school. And to be honest with you, it's not even the first day of school, the first couple weeks of school. If this is the first time meeting, my name is Gabriel Vigil. I'll be teaching in Southern California for a total of 18 years. It is my goal for this channel to be a place where I can provide you tips and tricks of the trade to make your teacher life easier. So with that said, let's roll the intro and get this video going. Step 1 is set the correct tone. Now, have you thought about this? I mean, if you really thought about this, how do you want your classroom to be? I mean, do you want the classrooms to be, your classroom to be active and loud and participating? Or do you want them to be kind of quiet and more focused, working on stuff they need to do? Do you want your relationship with your students to be more casual and joking around, or more formal with a sign of a hint of respect there and everything else? But the first thing you gotta put in your mind is just really think, what kind of classroom environment do you want? And that is your tone. That is, you have to figure that out. And here's the reality. Just as there are different learning styles, there are different teaching styles. And each teacher is different as far as what they're comfortable with, as far as what they want to have in their classroom. Now, to be honest with you, as a first-year teacher, you're probably not going to know the answer to this right away. It's probably going to take you the full part of a year to really understand what you're comfortable with and what kind of environment you want to have. So don't beat yourself up if you don't figure this out right away. But the goal is to try to slowly figure out those things so that way you can create the classroom that you really want. Now, here's the great thing about it. You can also change your mind. That is one of the best things about teaching is we get a fresh start every semester. So every semester, fresh start, you can do things different. And then you got the at the end of the year, then you start with a brand new class and do it all over again. So don't beat yourself up. You can't quite determine exactly what kind of environment you want, but start thinking about that and start moving in that direction, and that'll definitely make your life a lot easier. If it was up to me, I would start the year strong. I would start it very strict, and slowly as the weeks go on, release some of those reins and give the kids more freedom. But here's what I found out to be true, that once you lose control of that classroom, it takes about 3 weeks to gain that back. So instead of going through that process where you lose control of the classroom and then you try to pull it back, it takes you 3 weeks to get it back, and then you lose it again and you gotta pull it back again. Instead of going through that process, start off strict and really regimented, and make sure you have all your plans down, everything you need down, and then really format it so that it starts off very disciplined. And then as the weeks go on, you can ease up in the reins. Now, there's a saying that goes, don't let your students see you smile until December. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the exact verbiage of that, but I do agree with the sentiment that you want to make sure you start strong and then ease up as you go along, as long as you're able to, as long as you're comfortable doing that. Now, the word strictness is kind of a matter of interpretation. For each person, it's a little different. For me, what that means is, this is what I do in my class actually, is I spend the first day, the title of the video is what to do your first day, but the reality is you're going to start this the first day, but you're going to carry this process through for the first couple weeks, and even parts of it even through the entire year. So for me, what I do the first day, the first couple of weeks, is I set the tone. I basically have the students come in, we do our normal routine, then lay out the rules, the groundwork for what I expect the students to behave like in the class. And I will be honest with you, I spend the first 2 to 3 weeks, I don't teach any specific lesson, anything specifically. All I do for the first 2 or 3 weeks is teach my routines. And that is tip number 2, routines. See what I did there? Huh? Routines. All right, here we go. Step 2, routines. Routines. I cannot stress enough, you need to have routines. Routines are like habits. In our life, we have habits. If we have good habits, that moves us towards our goals. In the classroom, those routines, those good routines will make your classroom more effective and make your teaching life a lot easier. So you need to make sure you develop really good routines. So just like you would think about what kind of tone you would have for your classroom, you have to think through what are the routines you need to have in your class to make it run effectively.
Your routines were amazing.
Why, thank you. I work really hard at those routines. And by the way, if you ever want to know what some of our routines are, I'll leave some links in the description below so you can take a look at some of those routines. Or just go to my video library and you'll see different routines I have. But I have a routine for pretty much everything in the class. But to get you started, just think of some basic routine. Here's some basic routines you want to consider. What are your first 5 minutes of class going to look like? What are your last 5 minutes of class going to look like? How are you going to pass out papers? How are you going to collect papers? What kind of system are you going to have in place to allow students to use the restroom or go see the nurse or something else? Those are just 5 of the basic ones you got to think of. But you really got to think through your entire classroom, how everything is going to work. And the better routines, the easier teacher life is going to be. Most of the books I read about teaching, I'll be honest, I really don't get much from them. It seems like a lot of fluff, and a lot of, philosophical principles, but no real practical things. But the one book I highly recommend, and I got this my second year of teaching, I think it was it's Harry Wong. His name, I think it's called The First Days of School or something like that, but Harry Wong, and it's probably one of the more well-known books. But I would highly recommend that book if you don't have it already. That lays out a lot of good routines that you can start to build off of. And as I mentioned before, I really don't teach anything of substance for probably about the first 2 to 3 weeks. I am just going over all my routines, just practicing my routines over and over again until we have it down. Because once that's down after the first 2 or 3 weeks, then I can effectively communicate, effectively teach my students. But without those routines, it is a tough thing to do. And those routines, they're going to reinforce your tone that you want to have in the classroom, that classroom environment. So now you got the tone of the classroom environment. Now they got your routines. Now you can execute on your expectations. Hey, by the way, that's our third tip, expectations. Let's get to it. So if you haven't figured it out yet, the first day, the first week, the first 3 weeks is all about the self-reflection and trying to determine what kind of class you want and then trying to execute on that. And so the third tip is know the expectations you have for your students. What I mean by that is you got your behavior ready. It kind of is tied with routines and kind of tied with tone. But I mean your learning expectations. What do you want the students to get out of your class?
What do you want?
Once you know the answer to this, then you're able to develop lessons that'll move you towards that directive. Now, to be honest, for me, that answer has changed over time. I remember when I first started teaching, my goal was to have students retain as much information they could about history. Dates, people, events, all those things. That was my goal, is have them retain as much information as possible. But as the years moved on, and as I started to understand teaching more, my learning expectation for my students has changed. Today, what I want my students to leave the class with is the ability to think. That's it, the ability to think. So my lessons are geared towards the ultimate outcome of getting my students to think. I tell my students at the beginning of the year, I want them to think of this question all year long. And that question is, do you really believe what you say you believe? Think about that one for a second. Do you really believe what you say you believe? Then I tell them what we're going to do is, as we learn about history, we're going to see how that history, how that question ties in to what we are learning. Now, if you want to see how I do that in my history class, I'll make sure to leave a link below that shows one of my lessons in which we go through that thinking process. So I'll leave that in a link below. But that's my ultimate goal, is to have students to leave the year thinking about, questioning about what they believe, what they don't believe, and using history to reinforce or back up their beliefs. So for you, that answer is going to be different. Maybe you want them to have an appreciation for literature. Maybe you want them to see how math can be used to solve things in their common day life, or how science is all around us, or whatever else it might be. That you have to form in your mind is what you want your students to get out of your class. So once you have that, boom, the rest starts falling in place. So those are my 3 tips for the first day, first week, first couple weeks of school. Get those information wrapped up in your mind so that way you can execute on it. Now, to be honest with you, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And once you can start diving into that, you're gonna need some more concrete, practical skills, techniques, routines, you name it, you're gonna start formulating those and getting those down. And so please feel free to click on one of the links that you'll see popping up here shortly that give you better ideas in classroom management and everything else. But in the meantime, if you need a copy of my first weeks of scheduling, please put a link in a comment below, or please put a comment below and I'll definitely get that out to you. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave that in a comment below as well. But with that said, thank you for watching the video and stay zesty.